Hey guys, welcome back to today's tutorial where I'm going to be teaching you how to cut a male pants trouser, right? So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So guys, what I did at this point is to measure out the length of the pant on the fabric, right? On the fabric salvage. I measured out the length of the pant plus my hemming allowance and my upper sewing allowance, right? So that's what I have here, right? So when I measured it, I just folded the fabric in half like so, right? So this is the wrong side of the fabric and this is the right side of the fabric. Now there are two things that determines why you fold your fabric like that. The first thing that determines the folding of the fabric is the size of the client, right? So if the size of the client is not that big, if the client is like anywhere between a standard size to a small size, you can do this. It will help you to manage fabric. And then the second thing that, but if your client is big, right, like if the client is a plus size person, you cannot fold your fabric like that. So you have to fold like your regular folding of fabric, that's using the entire length of the fabric to be the length of the trouser. I hope you understand what I'm saying, right? So the second thing that determines how you fold your trouser is the length of the fabric itself. Now this fabric that I'm using, the length is by 60, right? Or even more. I think it's 60 or more, right? So you can see from that point to here we have about 29 to 30, so which means the length of the fabric is by 60, right? But if your fabric is maybe, let's say, by 45 or anything less than 60, you cannot fold your fabric using this pattern. So you would have to fold your fabric like on the regular folding of your fabric when you want to cut your clothes, right? So guys, the first thing I'm going to do is to make a starting point line which will double as my waistline, right? So I'm going to be adding a waistband to it, right? And I'm also adding an elastic band, right? So I'm just going to make a straight line across. Do not mind this do not mind the slant lines that you're seeing on the fabric. I can't necessarily use those slant lines because that's not how the fabric really came. It didn't come that straight for me to use the slant lines, right? So I'm just going to be making do with what I have. Right? So from here now, I'm going to mark the length from this starting point. I'm going to mark that I've ruled here. I'm going to mark the length of my trouser. So the length of the trouser is 40 inches, right? So I'm going to mark that 40. Then I'll add 3 inches for hemming the, or let me do 2 inches for hemming the trouser, right? So I'll mark 2 inches or 2.5 for hemming of the trouser, right? So I'm going to come back to the waist area, right? And I'm going to be marking the distance from my waist to my hip, right? So sometimes the clients, maybe if you have someone sending you measurements, they send very incomplete measurements, right? So now the measurement that I have, the waist of this client is 40, the lap is 28, right? And the length of the trouser is 40, which means the client is a little bit tall, right? So they actually sent me an incomplete measurement. So I'm going to determine the hip length on my own. So which means the hip length should be around around 8 inches, right? 8 to 9 inches will be fine. So now I'm going to be adding a waistband which will be a total of 1.5 inches waistband. That's the waistband that I want to be adding. So from this before I insert any horizontal measurement, from this waist that I have here, that's my starting point, I'm going to mark my 1.5 starting from there, right? So my 1.5 is going to start from here. Then I'm going to mark the distance from there to my hip, right? So I'm doing 8 inches, so I'm going to mark 8 inches, right? Then I'm going to mark the distance from the waist to the crouch. I still have my tape on this 1.5 inches, right? So I'm using 10 inches crouch for the client, because looking at the measurements, the person is a little bit bigger, but if it was a little bit smaller person, I would have used crouch of 9 inches. So that's why I'm using 10 inches for my crouch, right? You can even use 10.5, but don't make it 11, guys. It's going to look funny, right? So I'm using 10 inches. So the next thing is from my waist to my knee. Now I've not moved my tape from this 1.5 that I have on the starting point, right? So I'm going to mark my knee measurement, which will be somewhere around 20.5, because just like I said, the client is tall, looking at the length of the trouser being 40, so it's 20.5. They didn't send me these measurements, guys, so this is just me using my brain, right? So I'm going to insert those measurements, move the tape and insert it on this side so that I can connect my points into a straight line, right? So I'm marking that 8 inches for the hip, 10 inches for the crouch, and I'm also going ahead to mark 20.5 inches for the knee. Then I'm coming down to mark 40 inches for the length, and then 3 inches or 2.5 inches. Let me just do 3 inches sewing allowance, guys, right? So I'm going to correct this 40 inches that I have here. I'll adjust it properly, then 3 inches sewing allowance. Then I'm going to come up with my ruler and connect it into a straight line. So this fabric is bluish, and my chalk is blue, so I hope you can see properly. So I'm going to be connecting that, all my lines, like so. Then my knee point as well, I'll be connecting my knee point. Then the hem of that's the knee side, the ankle side, I'll be connecting. Then the 3 inches sewing allowance as well, be connecting that, right? So this is what I have at this point, right? So now on my crouch line, now this is my waistline, this is my hip line, my crouch line, my knee line, my ankle line, and my hem line, right? So on my crouch line, I'm going to take my lap measurement, which is 28 inches, divide by 2, right? So you have to measure this on the upper thigh measurement, right? So the thigh measurement is 28, divided by 2 is 14, right? So I have 14 inches here, right? So I'm going to mark 14.5. Now I'm adding this 0.5 so that from here I have half of an inch sewing allowance from here. So I'm marking 14.5, right? So I'm just going to connect that point like so. I'll just mark it on the thigh measurement. Then these measurements that I have here, I'm going to bring it up to the waist line and mark the same thing, but that's not going to be my waist measurements, right? So on my hip line, I'm going to measure my hip measurement divide by 4, right? So the thigh measurement and the knee measurement, the ankle measurement is going to be divided by 2, but for the hip and the waist measurement is going to be divided by 4. Now they did not give me the hip measurement of this client, so I'm going to be dividing the chest measurement of the shirt, which I'm not drafting the shirts today, right? Then from the chest, I'm going to take out 1 inch, and then that's what I'm going to be using. So the chest of this client is 44. I'm taking out 1 inch, which will be 43. So that's what I'm going to be using for the client's hip measurements, right? So I'm going to divide 43, right, by 4. But you should measure yours. Measure your hip measurements, guys. Take all your measurements. So I'm going to divide it by 4. And then this is what I have, right? So I'm going to add half of an inch from that measurement. Then I'll mark it on the hip line, right? So I have it here. I'll mark it on the hip line. Now what I have there, right, I'll bring it up to my hip measurement, to my waist measurement, and mark. Then I'll connect it in a straight line like so. I'll just go ahead and square the line over here from the hip to from the waist to the hip, right? So now I'm going to use my French curve to connect these points to this crouch measurements that I have here. So I'm just going ahead to connect that point nicely, right? So I'm just going to connect that, you can see. Then now for my waist measurement, I'm going to divide my waist by 4. So the waist that I'm working with is 40 inches, divided by 4 is 10. So now I started marking all my measurements from this side towards here, but for the waist measurement, I'm going to start marking from this line that I have here, right, coming backwards. So I'm going to mark 10, starting from here to this point. I'll mark 10 inches, right? Then I'm going to add maybe half of an inch for that, for my dart. So I'm going to mark half inch for that. Then I'm adding half inch for sewing allowance, right? So it's a total of 1 inch. So I'm going to connect this last mark to my hip point, right? So I'm just going to connect that like so in a straight line, right? So now let's come back to the knee side. Now for the knee side, whatever you have on the crouch here, you're going to measure it. Remember, I have 14 inches, right? So I'm going to divide what I have on the crouch line by 2. Then I'll mark it on the knee point. Now that is not my knee measurement, guys. I'm just marking it to get the midpoint of this line, right? So on the ankle line, I'm going to go ahead and mark the same thing, because I want to draw a straight line, right, that will connect all my points together. So I'm just drawing that. Then I'm going to draw that into a straight line from the crouch to this side, right? Just pay attention, guys. Trouser patterns are usually very, very easy to make, especially male trousers like this one, right? So you just connect. So I have this straight line now. So my knee measurement is 18 inches. So I'm going to divide 18 by 2, right? That's because we are working on one leg of the trouser, so I have 9 inches, right? So now I'm going to spread that 9 inches from this line. Half of the 9 will go here, half of the 9 will come to this side. So you know half of 9 is 4.5. So I'm going to put my 4.5 on the line, right? Then I mark my 4.5 here, and I mark my 4.5 here, which is a total of 9 inches from here to here. So now I'm going to use, you can use your hip curve if you have, but if you have this multi-purpose pattern master, you can just go ahead and use that. Or if you don't, you can just do that by hand to connect this point to the, I'm connecting it to the crouch line, right? So you just go ahead and connect your measurements like so, right? So for this side, I'm going to connect as well using my curve, right, to connect like so. These lines are not straight lines, guys. They are curved lines. This one is curving like this, and this one is curving like this, right? So now the next thing to do is my ankle measurement. So my ankle measurement is 15 inches, and I'm going to divide 15 inches by 2, right? And it's going to give me 7.5. So I'm going to put half of 7.5 on this line. Then I'll put half of 7.5 here and half of 7.5 here, right? So I'm going to use my ruler to connect this line like so. So I'm going to be connecting it using my ruler. So I'm connecting like so. Then I'll connect this point as well. If you have a longer ruler, that will be fine, to be way better than what I'm doing, right? So you connect it like so. So you can see our front block is already coming out nicely, right? So on the waist side, back to the waist side now, I'm going to drop here because you know, like the tummy area has some sort of a curved shape like so. So to get that curved shape from this waist area, I'm coming down by let's say 0.6. You can do up to 1 inch, right? But I'm going to use 0.6 on my own here. I'm coming down by 0.6, then I'm going to connect the 0.6 back to this side, right? So I'm connecting it back to the waist. So it's just sort of like a slanted line here, right? So now I'm going to mark from this midpoint. I'm going to mark 5 inches going outwards, right? So I'll mark 5 inches like so. Then I'm just going to go ahead and mark my dart on that point, right? So my dart will be like 3.5 inches long and then ½ inch wide, right? Right, so you just have something like this. By the time I'm cutting it, I'm going to make a notch so that I have it on both sides and I'll know what I'm doing, right? So now I'm going to cut. So I'll start cutting from my waist like so. So I'm going using this slant to come down. That 0.6 inch slant is what I'm using to come down, right? So on this side, I'm going to cut leaving allowance here. That's for this side. Now don't forget, this is my hemming allowance, right? So I'm going to come back to refine that line. So guys, now on this side, I'm going to cut this line that I have here. So what I'm left with now is my hemming allowance, right? So before I shape out this side properly, I'm going to bend my hemming allowance the way I would like so. This is my trouser length, so I'm going to bend it from that trouser length, right? I'm going to bend it like that and give it a nice press, right? So I'll give it a nice press before I cut that side out, right? So now by the time you give it a nice press, you're going to follow this line. So I'm folding it like this so that you can see. So I'm going to cut out this side and follow the line. By the time I open it, you'll see why I need to do it that way, right? So here we go. If you look closely, this side is not a straight line, right? This is not a straight line. So it will be a little bit slanted because this side on this region is not a straight line. So that's why I did that like that. So let's finish off our cutting on the. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off my cutting. I'm going to make a notch on my dart side, making a notch there. Then I'm going to measure 1.5 inches from this side inwards, right, and make a notch there, right? And then I'll bring back this side of my fabric and lay it out nicely. So I'm going to lay my fabric back on it. So now you can see the wider side that initially we have, right? That's the leg side is where I'm laying my waist now, right? So I'm just going to arrange this nicely, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is, you see this crouch line, I'm going to extend the crouch line by 2.5 inches, right? So on this side I'm going to mark 2.5 inches here, right? That's from the beginning of the front crouch. I'm extending it by 2.5 inches, which is here. Then every other side, on this side, I'm going to, now on the knee side, I'm extending it by 2 inches, not 2.5 now. On the ankle as well, I'm extending by 2 inches, right? So every other place is going to be extended by 2 inches. So now I'm going to use my ruler to connect, right? Then on this side I'm going to use my curve to connect, right? So by the time I'm done connecting like so, on this side I'm going to come down by 0.6 inches, right? We'll come down by 0.6 inches and make a mark. So on this line now, right, this line that I have here, which is going to be the crouch, the front crouch line, no, not this crouch line now, right? So this is going to be where the zip is going to be. That's if there's a zip eventually on the pants, right? So I'm going to go up by 1.5 inches. This 1.5 inches is for the butt rise, right? So you know the butt side, because of the butt, it raises your clothes up on the back. So that's what this is, to cover the butt side more, right? So I'm going to measure what I have on my waist in general, right? I have around 11 3/4. So I'm going to place that 11 3/4. Now see this, I'm slanting my tape now. My tape is starting from here still, but it's going up to this 1.5 inches that I went up here. Then I'm going to mark that 11 3/4 on that point. Now remember I told you I want an elastic band on the back waist side, right? So I'm going to be adding 1 inch on that side, which will be allowance to gather in that elastic band. So I'm going to connect this side now to that waist side. So it's going to be a slanted line. I'm going to connect it like so to here, right? So now the next thing that I'm going to do is to connect this side to this side in a curve. Now I'm not going to be using my French curve. Now I'm connecting to this 0.6 that I went down here. So I'm not going to be using my French curve, but I'm just going to be visualizing it, guys. So I'm going to have something like this, because the line is not really straight and it's not curved. It's not that curved like that of a French curve either. So it's just to practice that specific line. Then for the side is basically just going to be the same, right? So I'm going to be cutting out my back panel now. So guys, this is our front and back panel. This is our front, and then this is our back. For the back, we are going to keep it aside first and work on our front, right? So guys, this 1.5 inch that we have here, I have my paper stay here, so I'm going to measure like 7 to 8 inches on this side, right? Then I'll lay my paper stay on that side like so. Now mind you, I'm doing this on the wrong side of the fabric, so I'm going to just press down my paper stay on that side, on the that side of the the trouser. So you can see I'm laying my paper stay on the wrong side of my fabric, right? So I'm going to start from the 1.5 inch. I will bend like so. You can do 2 inches, it doesn't have to be 1.5 inches, right? So I'm going to measure depending on how wide you want the pocket, but it shouldn't be more than 8 inches. Anything from 7 to 8 inches is fine. So I'm going to grab that point, right? Then I'll just make a little notch, then I'll bend till that notch, right? Then I'm going to give it a nice press. So you can see now you trim off the excess paper that you have. So this is it about this side, right? So you can see now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. So on the wrong side of the fabric, I will iron paper stay. The glue side would be faced down on the fabric. Then I'm going to bend as well. Now this side will just give the pocket side a little bit of structure. What I'm doing now, right? To give, you can use hair stay or any stay of your choice. I just like using the paper one. So this is it. You can see what this side looks like. It's nice and properly ironed. So now I'm going to cut the pocket bag and other parts for you to see. So from this scrap that we have, we are going to make our zip, the guide for our zip from here. So I'm just going to so this is going to be a carrier for our zip. So one is the left side, the other one is the right side, right? So there's no, I'm still going to reduce this length, this width actually, but the length should be anywhere from 9 inches will be fine. 9 to 10 inches is fine. Then it should be by, let's say, 3 inches most. I will still be reducing this size, but that will be when I'm sewing this, right? Then the next thing we are going to be cutting is the attachments for our pocket and then our waistband. Let me grab some fabric for you to see. So I have this piece of fabric and I'm going to just prep it so that I'll use it for the pocket extension at the front, right? So you just make a curve out of it like so, and it doesn't have to be that long. Around 10 to 11 inches length is okay. So I'm just going to use like so. So I have this piece. So when we are sewing this, you see how I use it on the two sides of the pockets, right? So let's cut the waistband. So guys, here I have all my fabrics, right? This is the waistband. So I cut it out like so and I interfaced it. So this interfacing side is going to be the actual waistband. So I made 3 inches interfacing, then I just folded it like so. So this is going to be the front side of the waistband. This will be the back side of the waistband. This one does not have any interfacing and this one is wider. It's going to be the one that carries the elastic, this one. And then we have our front panels here, our back panel, then we have our zip holders and the pocket extensions, right? So this is it about our cutting. So in another video we are going to do the sewing. So if you're interested in seeing that video, let me know in the comment section, right, and I'll bring it. If you enjoyed this video, do ensure to like, share and subscribe, right? If you're not already subscribed, see you in my next video, guys. Bye.